Today we're going to be looking at how to create two combo boxes, and with the selection in the first box determining what actually happens in the second box. So here I've got an example of what I mean. Just refresh that. So I've just selected Bob Driller of Melton, and he's got two orders, both on the 2nd of the 9th. But if we select John Sloan, he's got a lot more orders. So whatever's selected in the first box determines what there is in the second box. Oh, Betty Sim's got lots of orders. Okay. So I'm not going to use this database for this, but I'm going to just grab one that's at the beginning. Okay, so we're working on this order by customer subform. And the first thing you can see is that there's two unbound text boxes here. They're actually combo boxes. They've come from up here. We've got combo box, and just by placing a combo box on, you can see that it says unbound. What this means, if we go over and look at the data, it has no control source, which means that this box isn't bound to any field in any table, meaning that whatever we select in here isn't actually being put into one of the tables. If we were to bind it to a particular table or a field in the table, we'd select one of these, and then whatever value we put into this combo box, its value would go back into the field of the table that we've selected. But we don't want that today. We want to have these unbound boxes. So we have two here. The first one's for customer and the second one's for order date. So the idea is, as we saw a little earlier, is that we're going to select in this combo box. Let's go back to it in design view, out of design view. We're going to select a customer in this combo box, and the relevant orders for that customer will show up in the second combo box. So the way we're going to do that is, firstly we're going to select the first combo box. I'm going to do just like we would normally. We're going to get a row source to be visible in there. We're going to click on the ellipses over there to bring up the query builder, and the things that we want from our customer is our customer table, just the once, oops, and that's all. So I'm just going to delete that. In Teleline we're going to need something else. We're going to need the suburb, so just bring my suburbs table over. Okay, so we've got all the information about the customer. I've got all from the customers table, and then because the suburb is linked to the suburbs table, we're going to use this data as well. First we're going to bring down is the customer ID. This is what we're going to use to filter in the second combo box. I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. And you may remember when we looked at the combo box earlier, it didn't have multiple fields in visible. So what we're going to do is do that concatenation again. We're going to join together the first name and last name. And if you remember when we're concatenating, so I'm just reading something popped up on my desktop. Okay, when we're creating a new field from concatenated data, we have to give it a name first. So I always call it full name and the colon to access that this doesn't exist yet. This is something new we're creating. And then we use the square brackets and the names of the fields that we want to put together. So I'm going to have first underscore name, square brackets, and then the concatenation character, which is the ampersand, then a space inside speech marks and another ampersand, and then we're going to bring the last name in. Last name with a small a. So here we're bringing our two fields that do exist, first name and last name, together with the concatenation character and empty speech marks. Actually not empty, it's got a space in the middle to separate the contents of these two fields. Okay, but because we might have two customers in our database with the same name, it's not uncommon. I'm going to add probably the address next. So I'm going to join again with the ampersand. I'm going to put another space in, so speech box, space, speech marks, another ampersand. I'm going to put square brackets. I'm going to bring the address in as well, and square brackets again. So there we go. So bring first name, last name and address in, and rather than actually have a space, I'm going to write the word of in there. So space, of, space, and we'll see what that looks like. So now we can see that we've got John Sloan of 1 Red Street and Betty Sim of 2 Stone Road. Probably want the suburb on there as well. So go back to design view and go and space, speech mark, space, speech mark, and the suburb name. So we're not going to use this suburb here, but we're going to use the suburb name from over here. If we were to put this field in here, it would just be a number, because this is the foreign key for this primary key here. It's the one-to-many relationship. So I'm going to use suburb name instead, and that's capital SUBURB underscore small n. So I'm going to type it exactly as it is in the database, and let's have a look now. There we go. So John Sloan of 1 Red Street, Denton, and Betty Sim of 2 Stone Road, Melton. So this is really going to give us an idea of exactly who we're choosing in that first box. It's going to be, we're not going to mistakenly choose the wrong person because we've got their name and their address as well. So I'm going to close that. Yes, I do want to update the SQL statement, and that's done. Let's have a quick look and make sure that that's as we expect it to be, and there we go. Need to make this combo box a little bit wider because the content's too big. We can go to the layout view and click on the box and drag it wider, and that's nice. That's a whole lot better. Okay, so now we've got our first combo box. If we go back to design view and actually have a look at that combo box and look at this, you remember that we put the customer ID in the first column. So what we should do, I mean, because this is actually what's actually identifying the person. It's not their name or their address, but it's actually their ID. So we're going to go back to our combo box and we're going to go to format, and I've already set the column count to 2 because we had 2 columns in that query before. We had the customer ID and then their concatenated name and address. So that's set to 2, which is why we don't see. I'll just set it back to 1 and back to there. Take those out. So if we look what it looks like with the 1 in there. Okay, so if we set that to 1 column, it's only ever going to show us the first column, which is the customer ID, and it's definitely there. So if we go back to design view and put it back as it was, because our query in our row source has 2 columns, in the format we want to have the column count set to 2, and we're going to hide the first column because even though the customer ID is important, we don't need to see it. We'll set that to 0 and 12, and Access will automatically put centimeters in for me. Okay, so that's where we should be. We've got just the name and the address. So that's column 2. Okay, so now we're there. We've got our hidden customer ID over this side, and we're going to use that to look into the orders table over here and get all of the orders for the customer that we choose. So let's say we're choosing John Sloan. I know that he's going to be customer ID 1. So if we look in orders table, we're going to want all of the number 1s. So every time John Sloan has made a purchase, we want the date of that purchase available for us to click on. Okay, the way we're going to do that is, again, click onto our second box, our combo box, and go to row source and the ellipses to bring up the query builder. First of all, we want the right tables. So we need our orders table up here. And that's all we need. So the things we're looking for, if we were to look at the data in this table, the order ID, it's the primary key, and that's numeric, that's an auto number. The customer is numeric as well, that's the customer number, and we've got the order date. So we need all of these three columns, these three fields in each column. The ones we're going to use is the order ID to find the actual order that we've selected. The date's going to be visible in our combo box, and the customer is the bit that we're going to filter the data just to get the orders for the right customer. So we're going to be putting some criteria in here to sort out our customers. What we're going to do first is going to close that, update the SQL statement. But what we need to do is know the name of this combo box. And I've set it up here to, if we go into other, we can see the name of the combo box is select customer. I'm going to copy that into the clipboard so I can use that in a little while. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to find, or actually we're going to be sending this query for this combo box to this page, this navigation subform, and getting the value that's in the first column of this combo box, which is going to be a customer number. Then we're going to use that to actually just get the right data in here just for that customer number. And the way we're going to do that is go back to data, go back to our ellipses. Just bring that up so we can see what's going on. So customer, so this is the customer number that we want, and what we're going to do is we're going to start finding that information. We know that our information is in a form. We'll start typing form. I just typed an F and forms comes up as the only thing that is in the database, and it closed the square brackets for me. So we're looking for a form. Next thing we do is we type in an exclamation mark. This goes down the hierarchy, so it's going to look at what forms there are available. And in our navigation form, that's the one we want. And then exclamation mark again. And always right down the bottom of this list is navigation subform. So that's the name of the form that sits inside the navigation. So we can type as many exclamation marks in there now, but that's the end of our hierarchy. To get further into our navigation subform, we need to type a full stop and form, and then the exclamation mark. So now this is saying that the navigation subform has a form in it, and it has these things in it. These are the elements on that page. And the name of our box was select customer, and there it is. So now this is saying that the criteria it's going to use to filter the data for the customer is getting the customer number from our navigation subform. So if we run that, it will probably give us an error because there is no data. Well, it won't tell us anything. Currently there's no data in our navigation subform, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So we go there, save the SQL statement. There we go. Because our navigation subform is in design view, it has no data in it. So we go back to form view and order by customer and select a customer. It's given us all of the order numbers for John Sloan. And we'll see if they're actually different. Let's just refresh that. Sorry. Bill Biggins, refresh that. See, it's given us all of the order numbers for Bill Huggins. That's not what we want to see in there though. We're not worried about order number, we're really worried about order date. And now we go back into design view, into our combo box, and do what we did before. Go back to format And you see, even though we have 3 columns in the query that's actually running this combo box, over here our column count is set to 1, so we need to change that to 3. We need to say column widths. Our first column is 0 because that's the order ID. Our second column has the customer number in it, so that wants to be 0 as well. And our third our third column has the date in it. So that's the one we want to give some width. I don't know why, but I always go to 12 centimeters. It seems to work. So our 3 columns in this combo box, we have the order ID, then the customer ID, and then the date. And the date's the bit that we want to show into the combo box. So that's the only one that we've given some width. She didn't type a comma there. Typed a full stop. So that's better. So our column widths are 0, 0, and 12. So we go back to that view. So let's select Bill Huggins. We know that he only had about 4. There you go. There's Bill Huggins' 4 orders. And if we change that to John Sloan, we will need to refresh. And then we have all of John Sloan's orders. And if we go to Betty Sim, who's got heaps and heaps of orders. There you go, she's got a couple of pages of orders. So there we go. So now the value that sits in our second combo box is completely dependent on what's happened in the first box. And we've done that by the row source of the first box is simply getting the data we want to be displayed. We want our customer ID hidden in the first column. And then we create our row source for our second combo box. We're using the customer ID that's hidden in here as our criteria to get the orders from the order table. It sounds a bit complicated, but if you go through the video slowly, bit by bit, and you'll see how it's done, and then it will make sense to you. The next thing we need to do is on this button, I've put a select button here. That was simply through going through design view and putting a button on, which is changed on my version. Doesn't have the X's on anymore, which is that's a button. And then the button has an event on click. And what I've done in this macro for this button is nothing. But what I will do, shall I go back and make sure I've got all the parts. So what I will do for this button is I'll create a query that again is getting the value out of this order date first column. So this will have the order ID hidden over here. Remember, it's got the order ID, then the customer ID, and then the date, and the date's the visible one. So we'll get the order ID from this column into a query and actually get all of the data for that order, and then we'll make a report from that query that displays the order. What it will look like is very much like the order invoice, but what we want to remember is that, actually I can show you exactly what I mean from over here. So we're going to select our client, refresh, select the relevant date, and then the button's going to run a query, which I've got over here called past order query, and then that query is going to post all of that data into report past order invoice, which is this one. And don't forget, it's pretty common to actually have copy of customer invoice if it's a copy rather than the original. What you can do is on your original invoice, which in mine is report customer invoice, I actually made a copy of that and then just changed 1 or 2 things. I actually changed it, the query that it was coming from. Rather than invoice query, I made it come from past order query. And really, that's all there is to it. So go through the video slowly, make sure you're sure what you're doing first, and then have a go. And if there are any problems, talk to me at school and we'll work it out. Okay, good luck.